Historically, Inuit and Yupik communities often lived in remote regions with limited contact with outside populations. As a result, they had a smaller pool of potential marriage partners, which could lead to marriages between close relatives, including cousins or other closely related individuals.
Marrying close relatives, also known as consanguineous marriage or incestuous marriage, can increase the risk of genetic disorders in offspring. When individuals who are closely related reproduce, there is a higher chance of inheriting harmful genetic mutations from both parents. Over time, this can lead to an increased prevalence of certain genetic diseases within a population.
The word Eskimo means those who eat raw meat, and Canadian Indians first began using this name for the indigenous people living in Alaska. However, the name Eskimo has a humiliating connotation of being uncivilized, so these people living in Canada and Greenland are called Inuit, which means humans rather than Eskimos. It is said that the Inuit rarely eat raw meat, which is not widely known. Experts say that if the Inuit lived on raw meat and no other food, they would not have survived because of all sorts of diseases and lack of nutrients in such a barren polar region. They smoked and cooked meat over a fire with things like whale oil and occasionally ate raw meat. Among Inuit food, there is also fermented food which is known as kiviak. Kiviak is quite possibly one of the most bizarre delicacies in the world. A traditional cuisine eaten in Greenland by Inuits during the wintertime, especially during Christmas. Kiviak consists of hundreds of dead oak birds stuffed into a dead seal and left to ferment under a rock for around a couple of months. Nowadays, almost all meat is cooked, while raw meat is eaten as a traditional food experience. Furthermore, the sex culture of the Inuit has been called very disordered, but in fact that is quite misleading. It is true that some Inuit have very unique sexual customs. If there was a guest from far away, a wife was allowed into a guest's room as a partner. This act was their courtesy. If the guest refused, it was considered a great insult to the lady.
A wife who came back after a guest refused to sleep with her was criticized by her husband and even suffered greater trouble. In severe cases, husbands beat their wives in front of all the villagers. However, not all Inuit tribes were like this, and it is said that the custom existed only in a few Inuit tribes who lived isolated in extremely remote areas.
This custom existed for a desperate reason of its own that even ordinary people living today can understand. Due to the extreme and barren environment and poor nutrition, the fertility of Inuit women was very low, and as a result, women's childbearing years were also very short. Still, since all living things have the instinct to survive and prosper, producing offspring was an unavoidable and urgent fate.
In addition, only a few tribes people lived in isolated areas in the harsh Arctic climate. So there were few people living together, and even if there were neighbors, they lived very far away. So there were almost no outsiders who visited even once in a while. So people had no choice but to marry close relatives to have children. As a result, they often had genetic diseases that followed them. People suffered from a variety of adverse conditions, including short lifespans, unknown diseases, physical deformities, and mental disability. As a result, the custom of loaning a wife was a way to survive, to prevent genetic diseases resulting from sex between close relatives. The custom was also a desperate effort to preserve the species by welcoming new, healthy, and good genes. This practice was a kind of desperate measure to prevent the side effects of intermarriage by introducing other seeds when a guest who had traveled a long way needed to stay overnight. In fact, when Inuit tribes were examined by doctors in Canada, they were in a serious condition, completely vulnerable to genetic diseases and in poor health. Among the tribes, those that had no contact with outsiders had no genetic diseases, and their situation was worse. In addition to having guests have sex with their women, people are said to have exchanged wives between tribes. When a wife was unable to conceive, the husband could borrow a woman from a neighbor or another tribe.
Conversely, if a husband had problems with fertility, the wife could go to a friend's husband or a man from another tribe to have a child. The child conceived in this way was regarded as their own and raised well without any discrimination. Also, a woman who went to another house for the purpose of pregnancy acted as a member of that house, doing housework and looking after the children.
Once Inuit men went hunting, they could go far away and not return home for a long time. When they went hunting, they sometimes took women, but during this time, women's role was to make food, mend clothes, gloves, shoes, and hats, etc., and do various chores. Men usually went hunting with their wives, but if their wives were unable to go, they often entrusted their wives to a man next door and took his wife on the hunt instead.
The man next door who was loaned the wife also took good care of her, and the husbands who exchanged wives in this way became closer than brothers. Anyway, as the situation was like this, it is said that the old Inuit people had many half-brothers or half-sisters. As mentioned above, the sexual custom of exchanging wives is driven by overcoming genetic problems and the instinct of preservation of the species. However, the Inuits' unique culture of loaning or exchanging wives began to be eliminated as uncivilized and barbaric custom as whites began to rule Alaska. In particular, as missionaries entered Alaska, this sexual custom almost disappeared, and it is an incredible, shocking sexual culture for those of us living today to imagine. In any case, these customs of the Inuit tribes, which they developed to survive, cannot be dismissed as barbaric, promiscuous, or disrespectful. Even if they lived a life different from ours, outsiders like us who do not know their painful situation cannot just judge them. Of course, now that the region has been modernized, this practice too has become an old custom. In addition, thanks to advanced medical science, the Inuit population continues to grow even if these customs are not implemented. At that time, the infant mortality rate was very high, and if children did not survive, the family would eventually come to an end, and the entire tribe would eventually perish if this continued. For this reason, it seems that this unique sexual custom was created. As an aside, among the Inuit people, there is a legend that has been passed down for a long time about an afterlife.
When an Inuit person dies, they meet a spiritual old man who asks the deceased if they have left any descendants. If the deceased left a descendant, the soul would eat delicious meat in a warm igloo, and if the deceased did not leave a descendant, the soul would be imprisoned forever in a frozen lake.
In order not to be trapped forever in the frozen lake, the indigenous Inuit had to leave behind descendants at all costs. The story of the unique sexual customs of the Inuit is about survival in a harsh environment. We hope to understand their desperate situation without just criticizing their culture as uncivilized. Thank you for watching the video, Indigenous People Who Lived in Alaska, provided by History and Current Events. Gina, Bella, and Tony have contributed so far as narrators. Thank you.